Welcome back to another episode of Archie Sonic Character Files as we explore the histories of the inhabitants on planet Mobius. In this episode, we take a look at the history of the alien menace from outer space known as the Black Arms. So, remember when I did that episode on Marine the Raccoon and I made this particular comment? Instead of going with the category of characters that are still active in some way, like Blaze and Silver, she ends up stuck in that one-and-done category, much like Black Doom and Shara. Yeah, well, 2 days after I posted that video, Sega decided to drop a teaser trailer for Sonic X Shadow Generations, and it just so happens to feature Black Doom! So I figured I now have an excuse to cover the Archie Sonic version of these alien creatures, even if this episode is mostly going to be focusing on one particular member. They made their first appearance, somewhat, in issue 170. Tails is excited to know that his uncle, Merlin Prower, will help him be reunited with his parents, who have been stranded in space for a long time. With the combined powers of Knuckles' guiding star gem and a Chaos Emerald, they arrive on the planet Argentum, now in ruins. Turns out the planet has become a war zone between the Black Arms aliens, who want to invade Mobius, and the Zorda, another group of aliens who want to destroy Mobius after their previous failed attempts. Despite all this going on, the group were successful in rescuing Tails' parents and teleported back to their home planet. The next issue is where we get the big lore dump regarding the Black Arms. When Sonic and Shadow get transported into some of Gerald Robotnik's old files, thanks to Nicole, they encounter data versions of both Gerald and Maria. The old professor reveals that he wanted to create Shadow as a means of a cure for NIDS that his granddaughter had been diagnosed with. Out of desperation, he made contact with the Black Arms aliens. Their leader, Black Doom, agreed to assist him in perfecting the ultimate life form, as well as gifting him the power of chaos control. Although Black Doom had more devious plans in mind to weaponize Shadow for his own personal usage, he was unaware that Gerald made some modifications to make sure Shadow would protect Mobius when the Black Arms would return in 50 years. Nicole is surprised on why they haven't showed up since it's already been 50 years, but Sonic assures her that the creatures are occupied at the moment. And that's pretty much it for the old timeline. The Black Arms are a little more active in the new timeline, starting off with the Shadow Falls story arc. They established that the events of Shadow's game had already happened. Aliens come down and take over the world, eventually Shadow defeats Black Doom, and teleports their flying fortress, the Black Comet, to a different location, so that it could be destroyed by the Eclipse cannon from the Space Colony arc. Well, it turns out years later, the alien creatures are back, now under the control of their new leader, Black Death. Team Dark, along with some gun soldiers, travel to this new Black Comet to try and destroy it. Later on, Shadow encounters Eclipse the Darkling, a creature that was made specifically to surpass Shadow with similar abilities. After the two fight it out, Eclipse taps into his mindset to try and convince him to join the Black Arms, but Shadow refuses. Black Death is annoyed by Eclipse's failed attempts, and steps in to finish the job. Now the Hedgehog serves them, and proceeds to attack his former teammates. Meanwhile, Eclipse is busy dealing with the gun soldiers. After some fighting, he manages to capture them, as well as the bomb that they were planning to use to destroy the comet. They soon arrive at a private room, where Eclipse reveals his experiments that he made to become the next generation of his race, the Dark Arms. He then leaves the soldiers there to be devoured by the creatures. Meanwhile, Shadow is free from control thanks to his teammates, and vows to get revenge on Black Death for controlling him. Rouge and Omega head to the nursery to free the soldiers, while Black Death tries to convince Shadow to stop resisting him, which doesn't work. And so the two have an epic one-on-one battle for the fate of the Shattered Planet. Meanwhile, Eclipse deals with Rouge and Omega by using all of his strength to trigger a more powerful form. But after a quick battle against Omega, he burns himself out and reverts back to his original form. Now he's powerless to deactivate the bomb that's been activated, and it will destroy the entire comet. Rouge informs Shadow to get out of there, but he refuses, as he still plans to finish off their leader and destroy the Hive Mind. Black Death, on the other hand, orders his troops to take the Dark Arm eggs to the escape shuttle, stall the gun soldiers and Team Dark so that they'll die in the blast, and as for his Death's Eye, he drags Eclipse off to the escape shuttle. Then he proceeds to try and finish off Shadow, vowing that he won't share the same fate as Black Doom. But after Shadow unleashes a mighty Chaos Blast, Black Death is no more. At the same time, Death's Eye dies as well, leaving a distraught Eclipse to mourn the loss of his leader. As his shuttle plummets down into the Shattered Planet, he vows that if Shadow does survive the blast, he'll make sure that the Hedgehog suffers a fate worse than death. The last time we would see these alien creatures would be in another Sonic Universe story arc, Total Eclipse. After crash landing on Angel Island, Eclipse is horrified to see that the Dark Arm eggs didn't survive, with the exception of 4 surviving creatures, who he names them Blurk, Kriegel, Sizer, and Regenta. He spends most of his time looking after his creations, and planting alien plants all over the island to create food to feed them. One day he heads out to scout the island, while the Dark Arms stay behind in their escape pod. When he overhears Knuckles, Rouge, and Omega chatting, he not only finds out that Shadow is also on the island, but the existence of the Master Emerald, and plans to make use of its power. With how he and Shadow are still part of the hive mind, he has some fun with Shadow by making him hallucinate Relic the Pika being an alien, and switching Dr. Snively's monitor with that of Black Death, thinking that he's still alive. Shadow finds out who's behind this, and the two brothers begin to fight. Eclipse tries to give Shadow one more chance to join him and save his dying race, but Shadow refuses as he still remains loyal to Maria's promise about protecting the planet. He then triggers his power form and gives Shadow quite the beating, but he soon gets a taste of his own medicine when Shadow taps into the Master Emerald's power to unleash a chaos control strong enough to slow him down. And after giving Eclipse a mighty Falcon Punch, he sends him flying into the distance. He then teleports back to the escape pod while having a laugh at Shadow from watching he and Knuckles fight over the fate of the Master Emerald. But his merriment dies down when he tells his creatures the bad news of failing to obtain the Master Emerald. Despite their young age, the Dark Arms are more than willing to help Eclipse in any way possible, which gives him a boost of confidence to return to the Master Emerald Shrine for round 2. With the power of the Dark Arms, he makes quick work of Omega, grounds Rouge the Bad and leaving her with an arm popped out of place, and threatens to kill Relic unless they are willing to give up a means of transportation. Rouge tells him that her team arrived in a gun shuttle that landed somewhere in Launch Base Zone, so now he and his Dark Arms head off to the aircraft with the Master Emerald as their prize, but not before destroying Dr. Snively's only means of communication to Team Dark. After dealing with many traps and other hazards on Angel Island, they finally reach the shuttle. Unfortunately for him, Shadow and Knuckles have put aside their bickering to stop him. At the end of it all, Knuckles is forced to destroy the Master Emerald so that Eclipse can't use its power. He's about to do the same to Eclipse, until Regenta helps him with a blast of its Sonic Cannon. With everyone knocked out, a weak and exhausted Eclipse gathers up his Dark Arms, takes the gun shuttle, and escapes Angel Island. The last we see of them is that they crash landed somewhere in a swamp, where Eclipse will most likely be waiting and plotting for the next time he has to deal with his brother. And that's the history of the Black Arms aliens, the Scourge of the Galaxies. Now, having aliens showing up is nothing new in Archie Sonic, but these guys have some noticeable things about them. Much like Eggman Nega, Black Doom and his creatures were considered off-limits from Archie Sonic for quite some time, hence why the only thing we got out of them in the old timeline was that they were busy fighting another group of aliens. Plus, the whole exposition dumping from the data version of Gerald Robotnik is the closest you're gonna get in seeing an adaptation of Shadow's game in Archie Sonic. It does sound pretty petty about these two fighting over the same planet, but to be fair, the Black Arms only want to drain the life force of the people on Mobius, while the Zordar wants to flat out destroy the entire planet. Once the new timeline started, it seems like Sega was more flexible about letting them use the alien creatures in a story that's basically a sequel to Shadow's game. All except for Black Doom. Yeah, this always annoyed me back then. I just wanted to see the guy in action and see how they would handle him in the Archie Sonic universe. I suppose the new timeline gets away with it, where they establish that the events of Shadow's game already took place, and apparently going off of the real ending route. But as for the old timeline, not so much. Just feels like another one of those cases where Sega doesn't quite understand the whole deal about alternate universes. But hey, at least we got Black Death. The other Black Death. And, I don't know, I'm not too thrilled over Black Death, since he just looks and acts like a diet version of Black Doom. Even having the exact same Doom's Eye gimmick, just now called Death's Eye. And his death at the hands of Shadow was kinda predictable, like, yeah, we know he sucks, let's just quickly kill him off, since we're not allowed to use the actual Black Doom. Though, to be fair, he's no slouch when it comes to combat, and was actually successful in getting Shadow to join his side, even if it was temporary. Apparently, the original plan for Shadowfall would have involved Black Doom and Mephiles the Dark joining forces, but Sega quickly rejected that pitch, so Ian Flynn had to come up with replacements in order to get the story the green light. So in terms of who would be the replacement for Mephiles, we got Eclipse. And I actually really like this character. while Mephiles was more or less just a dark entity taking on a similar form of Shadow and constantly pestering him to join the dark side, Eclipse is a much more personal rival to Shadow. He's basically a dark reflection of what Shadow could have been like if he was more loyal to the Black Arms. He does show signs of weakness, especially when trying to get Shadow to join his side, but I don't mind it. He's definitely the only Black Arms character that has any depth. One minute he'll be attacking a bunch of gun soldiers, and the next minute he has some downtime caring for his creations. Really makes the character feel more human in a way. Speaking of which, the Dark Arms. Well, I dig the name, but these guys are basically just a diet version of the Wisps. This is the closest thing you'll get to seeing any Wisp action in Archie Sonic, because outside of confirming that the events of Sonic Colors already took place in the new timeline, we never saw the actual aliens anywhere. I remember my friend Salamander considers their backstory about combining the DNA of Black Arms and Wisp to create the Dark Arms was the stupidest idea he's ever heard. And yeah, I'm not too thrilled about it either. You'd think they would have gone for something more powerful, like combining the Black Arms DNA with any of those alien creatures from Sonic Chronicles or something. Well, at least it gave us Magenta. Sure, it's based off of one of the more forgettable Wisps, but come on, having a Sonic Cannon ability is 10 times better than having an ability that's just a poor man's version of the Lightspeed Dash. So yeah, the Black Arms. That always seems to be one of those things where I know what they are and all that, but never really stop to think about what I personally think about them in general. Well, outside of thinking that they should have picked a different name that sounded less racy, I think they're fine. They have some cool designs and all that, even if Black Doom's personality doesn't go any more in-depth than, "Kill all the humans, we are the superior race, haha." Still, it is neat to see Shadow's origins be expanded upon, and in some way, it does give a better reason for why Gunn wanted to shut down Project Shadow and eradicate anyone associated with it. But man, Shadow's game is definitely one of those Sonic games that desperately needs a remake. I haven't fully beaten it myself, but it feels like the execution wasn't that great. Having a morality system with too many paths to take, and then suddenly throwing in a real ending at the last minute. Personally, I could see them go two ways about redesigning the layout for a remake. Either stick to the morality system and just trim the fat, or scrap the whole thing entirely for something more streamlined. Well, I'm sure some fan in the future will give it the remake it deserves. I mean, if someone is willing to go through the effort of remaking Sonic 06, why not do the same to this one? Nowadays, we've got Sonic X Shadow Generations coming out, which will feature the return of Black Doom. Or at least Doom's Eye, I guess. Unless they decide to throw in another one of those retcons of, "Oh, Doom's Eye? What are you talking about? That's Black Doom! That's what he always looked like!" I really don't have that high expectations for the game in general. Yeah, I'm being the cynical and pessimistic asshole and all that. Blame it on the meta era. Not to mention the fact that Sega has a lengthy track record of bad Sonic ports. But who knows? Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe it'll be longer than Episode Shadow, and that we'll see Black Doom's real form in all of its HD glory. Well, that takes care of this character file, so until then, I got juice!
Find the 7 Chaos Emeralds and bring them to me as promised.
Sure, bitch, go make me a sandwich.